Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we're going to take a look at this weekend's new moon in Aquarius, which is coming right as Venus is also making a conjunction with Saturn in Aquarius. So we're going to take a look at 5 themes to watch for given the pairing of these two events over the weekend. Before we do that, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. As you guys listen today, I'd love to hear your comments and reflections. You can find transcripts of any of my daily talks on my website, which is nightlightastrology.com. If you ever have a story to share about any of the transits, use the hashtag grabbed or email us your story, grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. I have been falling behind a little bit on getting the next grabbed episode out, and that's due to the fact that we're in the process of distributing all of the Kickstarter rewards. So most likely I will finally get to that next grabbed episode. They take a lot longer to produce. So I will likely get to that episode in another week or two. So I'm sorry for the delay for those of you who've been waiting. I have some great stories that you guys have shared about your transits of the year for 2022. It'll make for a very memorable episode. But in the meantime, keep the stories coming for new transits that come along, whether it's this new moon or the Venus-Saturn conjunction or anything else. Always appreciate hearing from you guys. Don't forget the new classes have just started. Roots and Spheres program starts this week. And we also have the Readings and Passages program that has just started. So if you want to check those out, it's on the website under the courses page at nightlightastrology.com. There are need-based tuition options for people if you need help. Email us if you have any questions about the courses after you check them out on the website at info@nightlightastrology.com. All right, let's take a look at the real-time clock so that we can show you the transit as always. Do that first. So here is the formation of the new moon on Saturday, January 21st. And one day later, on Sunday, January 22nd, Venus conjoins Saturn. And so the crystallization of the new moon, you could say, I would give it Saturday and Sunday, because when you see a new moon that's forming with another conjunction happening in the same sign happening on the next day, it spreads out the meaning of the new moon a little bit more and gives it a kind of 2-day window. Now, you could argue that because this is a new moon at the beginning of Aquarius that you might do that anyway. But my point is just that I would really look at this as a Saturday, Sunday kind of event. So the 21st and 22nd of January is the timeline we're working with. But the other reason why it's important to take a look at this is that, at the beginning of a moon cycle, whatever is happening tones the entire cycle ahead. So it's important to look at this from the standpoint of these energies shaping the next lunation period, which is, about 4 weeks. So what I want to do today is I want to look at 5 themes to watch for given the combination of a new moon alongside of a Venus-Saturn conjunction in a fixed air sign like Aquarius. Now, these 5 themes are not in any particular order of importance. They're just sort of the things that these are like your textbook archetypal expressions of a new moon happening at the same time that Venus and Saturn conjoin. So the first one to watch for would be an ending or parting of ways. A lot of the times we think about new moons as indicating new beginnings, which is fair enough. It's the beginning of a new cycle, and so it's a seed that's being planted. But I want you to think about the difference between endings and beginnings as often completely indistinguishable. How many times in your life has the next chapter of your life opened at the time that you had a breakup? It's not that you would say, well, it was because I became single that this new chapter opened up. Right? The new chapter opens up in your life because you had this cathartic breakup experience. How many times has a completely different chapter in a person's life opened up because of the death of a loved one? How many times has a new chapter in life opened up because you get let go from a job? It's not like you have another job lined up immediately in every time that happens. This is the kind of new moon, in other words, that has the look and feel of a chapter change that could be related more to an ending than a sort of prototypical beginning. Although with Jupiter in Aries, Mars having just turned direct, Mercury about to turn direct, I think that you're going to get more of that enthusiastic burst of newness as the cycle goes on this month, this lunation cycle. For example, when Venus gets into Pisces, she's exalted. these planets turning direct, especially Mercury and then Mars having just turned direct, you'll get a feeling that there's a momentum and more of the traditional feelings of new beginnings. But really, you're not going to get that burst, that feeling of like, oh, I'm really starting into something new, probably until we get that new moon solar eclipse in Aries a little bit later in the spring. Until then, I think that at least this moon cycle is marked by the feeling of an ending. Venus and Saturn coming together is bittersweet. It's like what was it, Sinatra that sang the autumn of our years, the autumn of my years, or something like that. So this has the feeling of an ending, a death, or even completion. So watch for that as something that is toning the entrance into a new chapter of life, ending or parting of ways. Now, that could be a relationship, a job. It could be something internal and psychological, but an ending or parting of ways. That's number one. Number two, a beginning rooted in Venusian maturation. Let's say, for example, that you are an artist and you make a great work of art and it takes you years. It's all done. You've finished something. Now, in the case of making a great piece of art that's taken many years, the completion of something that has reached its maturity and is now ready to be sold or shown in a gallery, something like that, that would be a beginning that is rooted in Venus having reached her maturation point. Or like if you think about, I don't know much about wine, but I imagine that certain wines must have a point where there's a sweet spot. You want to make sure you drink it between this year and this year. And I don't know if it's this case because I don't know much about wine, but if it goes beyond that, then it's like it's not going to taste very good. So the idea being that something has reached its sweet spot or its maturation point, and that the consummation or fulfillment of something that has a history behind it, that is reaching completion and reaching its sort of ideal form. Now, that could be a subtle thing. For example, there are going to be times in the life of a business where the sale or the sort of maximum potential of like a product or something is going to reach its peak, and it's recognized, it's celebrated. Maybe you even get an award at some kind of convention. Well, you've business of the year or something like that. And it's not that you won't have future success, but it'll have to be with a different product, because that one thing that you've done has now reached its maximum potential. So a peak moment of Venusian maturation, a style that you can't take any further as an artist, or maybe even in your wardrobe. It's like you've reached its maximum potential. So watch for things, a beginning that's rooted in Venus reaching its maturation point. Sometimes relationships have run their course, and it doesn't mean that something's wrong. It just means that we can't go further than this. And so the celebration of something having reached its full potential, but that could also mean the point at which it will have to evolve, or something will have to change or shift. So, for example, I think a lot about sports, right? Now, this is not exactly a Venusian example, but let's just say a defensive coordinator for a football team has reached some of their crowning achievements. It's right at that point where it might be time to say goodbye to that team because you're ready to be interviewed for head coaching jobs, right? So could be that there's a transition that happens because Venus has realized its potential. Number 3 would be clarifying an ideal. Venus and Saturn paired together in an air sign will almost always, maybe with the exception of Gemini, but with Libra and Aquarius, both signs that exalt Saturn or is the home sign of Saturn in the case of Aquarius, will point toward idealism or perfectionism. Now, that could be problematic. Venus and Saturn can actually be rigid and unyielding in its sense of what is beautiful or good or ideal. Venus will say this is what's lovely or desirable, with almost like a harshness or a rigidity when it's conjoined with Saturn. So perfectionism and idealism can certainly have, there's a shadow. But Venus-Saturn can also be about the clarifying of, or the exaltation of, some kind of ideal. When you think about, certain, I remember learning about Renaissance art and so forth, and you think of like the sculptures or paintings of the body, and like this is the, kind of like the ideal form, and the symmetry of the face, and just all of that kind of that sense where art and beauty and sensuality reach some kind of geometric or mathematical ideal. So Venus-Saturn can be helpful insofar as it helps us clarify or define an ideal to use as a way of moving forward, a standard that's being set. It could also be about some kind of rigid expectation that we can't possibly live up to. So these are things to watch for around the new moon and how they're presenting themselves in your life. Number 4 would be a point of maturation or expiration. So I already mentioned a Venusian moment of maturation, and I already mentioned endings or partings of ways. How does this differ? What I would say here is that it's very, with number 4, the big difference is that you're reaching a point where if you try to keep going with it, you'll be disappointed. It's a point where if you don't get off now, if you don't let go of something now, it will be worse for you. Let's give a simple example. Let's say that it's that cup of coffee. It's that third cup, or maybe for some people, it's that second cup. If I go further with this, the nice clarifying, activating energy of the coffee, it's going to tip over into anxious and nervous and sort of buzzed in a not so fun way. If I have one more drink, it's going to tip me into a headache tomorrow morning, which is right now, if I just start drinking some water, this will have been a very nice night. Do you know what I mean? So it's about recognizing when you can't go further with something. And the mature realization, I've taken this as far as I can go. And that's what I wanted to, hopefully that feels a little bit differentiated from what I was saying earlier. Number 5 is breaking containment. Remember that we have a controversial take on Venus this month. Has Venus been in a malefic enclosure or not? We went over that when I talked about the wild ride of Venus through the month of January. You can go back and look at that video if you want to. Has Venus been in a malefic enclosure or not? I haven't noticed it so much yet as of the time that I'm making this, but we'll see. But either way, remember that recently Venus squared Uranus. And as Venus squared Uranus, we had the idea of Venus needing to break free and innovate. Venus seeking freedom and liberation. Venus is then, right after that moment of square to Uranus, going into a conjunction with Saturn, met with some kind of hard initial limitation. Could Venus be ready to surpass some kind of limitation en route to the greater freedom that Venus is now interested in or seeks? That seems likely because after Venus passes over Saturn, Venus enters her own exaltation in Pisces here toward the end of the month. And so to me, the new moon is also toned by the idea that Venus could be reaching a point of greater freedom. Having faced some kind of opposition, limitation, constraint, frustration, and going through it, Venus may now be ready to feel freer and more fulfilled. So I think about a moment of Venusian frustration followed by the breaking out of some kind of shell or initial limit. And that would track in terms of Venus playing between Uranus, but then being held back by Saturn, and then surpassing Saturn and going into her exaltation. So some kind of moving past a limit or granting of greater freedom that comes, ironically, after or as Venus passes through the conjunction with Saturn. Some kind of hip check, Venus has to sort of live through and be tested by in order to experience the greater freedom and boundless qualities that maybe she's seeking right now. And to me, again, excuse me, that would make sense given the malefic enclosure symbolism that also may be in the air this month. So we've been kind of tracking that. So far, I haven't noticed it so much, but it's debatable. We talked about why it's debatable as to whether or not this is an enclosure, but we'll see. We'll just keep tracking and see how it goes. And if I feel like there's some obvious examples to draw on, then I'll certainly share them with you guys. In the meantime, I hope that these 5 themes just get you ready for the new moon over the weekend. Take a look at that whole sign house of Aquarius. We'll probably be doing an Astrology of Sports podcast as well for the weekend as a reflection backward on Mars retrograde and some of the themes around sports and the world of sports. So watch for that. Even if you're not into sports, it can be a great way to learn about Mars and Mars retrograde. So be sure to check that one out. And that's what I have for today. I hope you guys have a great weekend too. And we will see you again next time. Bye, everyone.